I saw my parents get turned away from my wedding before I ever made it down the hallway. Not from the ceremony. From the front door. My future mother-in-law stood under the club's brass crest, smiling like she was fixing a seating issue instead of humiliating two decent people in front of 50 silent guests. My mom was wearing the navy dress she had sewn by hand 3 weeks earlier. My dad had on the matching jacket she made for him at the same kitchen table where they had paid my college bills one envelope at a time. Vivian Hale looked them over once, then told security they did not have member access and did not fit the room. Nobody stopped her. Not the event manager. Not the guests pretending not to hear. Not my fiancé, who kept adjusting his cuffs like this was all just bad timing. They walked my parents past the reception doors, past the catering station, and out toward the service corridor beside the dumpsters. I was still holding my bouquet when I saw my father touch the old wallet in his pocket and go quiet. I knew then this wedding was already over. What stayed with me was not the service hallway. It was not the smell from the dumpsters or the way my mother kept smoothing the front of her dress like a crooked seam was somehow the problem. It was the phrase Vivian used. Member access. She said it like a verdict. Clean. Casual. Final. And my father reacted to those 2 words in a way I did not understand at the time. He did not argue. He did not defend himself. He did not even look embarrassed. He glanced up at the club name carved into the stone wall, then pressed his thumb once against that old wallet in his pocket and gave the smallest smile I had seen all day. That smile bothered me more than the insult. Because my father only smiled like that when he had figured something out before everyone else. I still did not know what was inside that wallet. I did not know why the words member access had changed the air around him. I only knew that by the end of that afternoon, the Hale family was going to wish they had never said them out loud. Before I tell you what happened. After they moved my parents beside the service entrance, take 1 second and tell me where you are watching from. I remember that moment clearly because it was the last cold, quiet second of the day. Then everything shifted and nobody could stop it. My name is Elena Brooks. I was 31 that spring, living in Brookfield, Illinois, working payroll compliance for a medical group outside Chicago. I spent my days catching small mistakes before they turned into expensive problems. Numbers trained me to notice patterns. Families taught me something harder. The ugliest systems are usually held together by people who smile while they exclude you. I grew up in a house where nothing was wasted and nothing was faked. My father, Daniel Brooks, was an electrician who could fix a dead circuit, a broken generator, or a room full of panic just by walking in and staying calm. My mother, Marlene, did alterations from home and took in sewing jobs whenever bills got tight. She could turn plain fabric into something dignified. She had done exactly that for my wedding. She made her own navy dress. She made a matching jacket for my father. She pressed every seam herself. I was their only daughter. I was also the one who left home, got a stable job, learned how polished people talk when they want control without sounding cruel. That was what pulled me toward Grant Hale at first. He seemed polished without being cold. He listened. He noticed details. He said he liked that I was steady. What I missed was this. Men like Grant can seem kind when there is no cost to it. And, because he never mocked where I came from, I made the mistake of believing he would protect it when his mother finally did to me. The Hale family lived inside a different code. They had money, donor plaques, invitations that arrived in envelopes, and opinions about what belonged in a room. Vivian Hale never raised her voice when she judged someone. She just trimmed them out of the frame. Move a chair. Change a table. Reword a sentence. Same result. I did not think I was weaker than them. Just slower to accept what they really respected. Not decency. Not effort. Access. Permission. Position. By the time my parents were pushed behind the main hall at my own wedding, I understood I was not marrying into a family. I was standing in front of a system. The wedding was set at Hawthorne Crest Club, a private place in the western suburbs that liked to remind people it had existed long before they arrived. The driveway curved past trimmed hedges and stone pillars. Inside, the walls held black and white photographs of past board chairs, charity galas, and men in tuxedos shaking hands like history had only ever been written by people with perfect posture. Even the air felt filtered. Polished wood. Cold glass. Quiet money. Rules printed without needing to be spoken. My mother had spent 6 weeks making the clothes she and my father wore that day. She chose a deep navy fabric because she said it looked formal without trying too hard. She hand-lined the jacket. She adjusted the shoulders twice. She redid the hem on her own dress at midnight 3 days before the wedding because she thought the drape looked slightly off under ballroom lighting. Nothing about what they wore was careless. Nothing about it was cheap in the way people like Vivian meant the word. It was simply not branded. Not imported. Not approved by the right kind of people. The signs started early. At 9 that morning, Vivian asked the event coordinator to move my parents' table farther from the front because the room needed better visual balance. At 10:30, she told the florist the family photos should be staggered so the backgrounds looked more elevated. At 11:15, she leaned toward me in the bridal suite and said she hoped my parents understood that private clubs had standards and that nobody wanted awkwardness on a formal day. Grant heard every word. He did what he always did when his mother crossed a line. He softened it. He repackaged it. He told me she was stressed and trying to protect the flow of the event. As if humiliation became reasonable once you called it logistics. What stayed with me from that morning was not just her tone. It was my father. He did not look around Hawthorne Crest Club like a man seeing it for the first time. He looked around like someone measuring what had changed. He paused under the framed portraits near the east hallway. He studied the brass directory by the library doors. Then he asked me a question so strange. It cut through everything else. Is the club president still the same man I told him I did not know? I asked why. He kept his eyes on the wall another second before answering. Long time ago. That is all. Then he touched the wallet in his pocket again. And for the first time that day, I stopped thinking my father looked out of place. I started thinking he knew exactly where he was. I found my parents behind the main hall near the service corridor, seated on 2 folding chairs beside a gray metal door marked maintenance. My mother still had her purse in her lap. My father was sitting upright, hands folded, looking calmer than anyone had a right to look after being pushed out of his own daughter's wedding like an inconvenience. I said I was sorry the second I reached them. My mother shook her head before I could say anything else. She told me to breathe. She told me not to ruin my own day over people who had already decided what kind of story they wanted to tell about us. That was how she was. Even hurt, she was still trying to protect the room from breaking. My father was different. He looked at me once and asked one question. Who gave the order? I told him it was Vivian. I told him security had just followed her lead. I expected anger. I expected at least one bitter sentence. Instead, he nodded like a man confirming a detail on a work order. Then he slipped his hand into his jacket pocket and pulled out that old wallet again. This time I saw more. Inside was a cream-colored card with worn gold trim. It did not look modern. It looked older than the club's new branding, older than the black membership cards I had seen in Grant's family wallets. I could not read everything from where I stood, but I saw a number stamped in the corner. 3 digits. The first one looked like a 0. Before I could lean closer, my father closed the wallet. I asked him what it was. He said, nothing I ever needed to use. That answer landed wrong. Not because it was vague. Because it sounded true. A few seconds later, the floor manager came down the corridor carrying a headset and printed seating charts. He glanced at us, then at my father, then at the wallet still resting in his hand. His eyes caught on the edge of the card. He stopped walking. It was brief. Less than a second. But people who work around power always react before they can hide it. His shoulders changed. His voice changed too when he asked if everything was all right down here. Down here. Not back here. Not over there. Down here, like he suddenly understood this was the wrong place for my father to be. That was the first moment I knew this day had not gone wrong by accident. Something in that wallet belonged to the structure they thought they controlled. I walked back into the main hall still holding my bouquet, still wearing a dress that suddenly felt less like a costume in somebody else's production. Hawthorne Crest glowed the way expensive places always glow when they want to look timeless. Candlelight. Crystal. Soft music. Guests speaking in lowered voices, as if good breeding meant never naming what was happening in front of them. Vivian Hale was standing near the escort table, one hand on the seating chart frame. She looked composed. That was what made her dangerous. She did not need volume. She needed witnesses. I stopped in front of her and said, "Why were my parents moved behind the service hall?" She gave me a patient smile. "Elena, please do not start this now. There was a small access issue and staff found them a temporary place to sit until we sorted it out." "No," I said. "They were not seated. They were removed. This is a members' venue. Your parents arrived looking informal for club standards, and security redirected them until things could be handled discreetly. That was her move. Condense the insult. Clean the language. Replace humiliation with procedure." I asked, "Show me where that policy is written." She laughed softly. "This is not about a line in a handbook. It is about understanding the room." "Then read the handbook anyway," I said. "Show me where it says the parents of the bride can be placed beside the dumpsters because they do not look expensive enough." Grant stepped in, jaw tight, voice low. "Elena, stop. Mom is trying to keep the event on track." I turned to him. "Your mother had my parents escorted past the kitchen like unpaid workers. The event is already off track. I am deciding whether anyone here is willing to call it what it is." He glanced around the room, not at me. Vivian folded her hands. "Nobody escorted anyone like workers. They were directed to a private area until access could be clarified." "Access," I repeated. "Member access. That is the phrase you used, right?" She said. "Yes, because this is a private club and there are expectations." "Good," I said. "Then tell me who has authority to apply those expectations." Vivian straightened a little. "My husband is a donor trustee. My son is part of a legacy member family. In a few minutes, you will be too, assuming you stop turning this into a scene." There it was. Not an answer. A ranking. I said, "That is not what I asked." "Who has authority on paper?" Grant exhaled hard. "Elena, not everything has to become a compliance review." "No," I said. "Just the moments when people use rules they do not plan to read." The event coordinator appeared beside us. Vivian pivoted toward her immediately. "Everything is fine," she said. "The bride is emotional and there was some confusion with guest placement." I cut in before the coordinator could nod. "No. Do not summarize it. Answer it. Were my parents moved because of written policy, or because Vivian Hale thought they looked poor?" The coordinator froze. Vivian turned back to me, smile thinning. "Elena, you need to understand how private institutions work." I said, "I understand exactly how they work. People like you count on nobody asking what is written because once something is written, you can be held to it." She took one step closer and dropped her voice. "This is member access, not public space. There are standards here." Something inside me went cold then. I looked at Grant one last time and asked, "Are you going to correct her?" He did not. He adjusted his cuff and said, "Please just let the staff handle it." That was the answer. I looked back at Vivian and said, "Then get the manager. And bring the policy. Do not explain it. Do not soften it. Read it." Her expression slipped. Because she knew what I knew now. The second people are forced to read the rule out loud, power stops sounding elegant and starts sounding small. The room reacted exactly the way rooms like that always react when truth becomes inconvenient. It moved around the lie. Nobody came to my side. Nobody defended my parents. Guests shifted closer to Vivian, lowered their voices, and let her version start circulating before facts could catch up. One woman touched my wrist and said private clubs sometimes had strict rules. Another told me not to let stress ruin a beautiful day. Stress. Rules. Misunderstanding. Cruelty gets renamed fast when money is in the room. Vivian used those words immediately. "Exactly," she said. There was confusion at the entrance. We tried to handle it discreetly, but Elena is getting emotional. Grant stepped in beside her. "Elena, we can deal with this after the ceremony. The only thing making it worse now is the scene." It was the kind of sentence that never solved anything. It just moved blame onto the person naming the problem. "Worse for who?" I asked. He said nothing. Vivian answered for him. "For everyone. For the guests. For your parents too. You are dragging them into more embarrassment." She had already placed my parents beside a service door like spare furniture, and now she was speaking as if she were protecting them from me. I said, my parents are already in the embarrassment you arranged. The question is whether you want it exposed or ignored. That was when the event coordinator returned with the floor manager, Martin. He carried a black policy binder and looked more careful than he had in the corridor. Vivian reached him first. Thank you, Martin. There was a small issue with unverified guest access, and the bride is distressed. We simply need to move forward gracefully. I said, open the binder. Martin hesitated, then flipped it open. There are general access guidelines for private events, he said. Guests must be associated with the event list or escorted by a member sponsor. Dress expectations are encouraged for formal functions. Staff may redirect individuals if placement is unclear. Vivian lifted one hand. There. Redirected. I said, keep reading. I believe that is the relevant section, Martin said. Then read the rest, I said. Especially the part about treatment of invited guests and immediate family members. He paused too long. I stepped closer. You stopped because there is a line you hoped nobody would ask for. Vivian's smile thinned. Elena, this is absurd. There is no reason to interrogate staff in front of everyone. Then there was no reason to humiliate my parents in front of everyone, I said. The room went quiet. Martin cleared his throat and read again. Club staff are expected to maintain professional conduct toward all listed guests and family members of event principals. Any seating adjustment or access clarification must be communicated with discretion and without derogatory commentary related to appearance, occupation, or perceived social standing. That line landed clean. I looked at Vivian. Do you want me to repeat the part about perceived social standing? She did not flinch. Policy language is broad. Context matters. Your parents were not registered as members. They were registered as my parents, I said. Grant said my name like a warning. I ignored him. Vivian told Martin to close the binder. She said this could be settled internally after the ceremony. Internally meant privately. Privately meant after the room had already accepted her version. I said no. We settle it now. She turned back to the guests with that polished half-smile women like her use when they want to present another woman as unstable without saying the word. Weddings are emotional, she said. Elena has always been sensitive when she feels people are judging her family. Instead, I felt myself get calmer. I said, you are right about one thing. I do know when people are judging my family. That is why I know exactly what you did. Then I looked at Martin, who ordered security to move my parents. He swallowed. Mrs. Hale raised concerns about access. That is not an answer. Who gave the order? He glanced once at Vivian, then said, I approved the relocation until identity could be clarified. There it was. A real sentence. A real decision. Process. And process can be traced. I asked, based on what missing identity? Membership status, he said. The words had barely left his mouth when my father walked into the room. He did not hurry. My mother was beside him, calm after the first shock had hardened into dignity. Guests turned fully now. The people they had been told to ignore were standing at the center of the floor. My father stopped beside me and looked at Martin. You wanted identity clarified, he said. Then he opened the old wallet. For the first time I saw the card clearly. Cream-colored stock. Worn gold border. An embossed seal. From an older version of the club logo. And in the lower corner, the number 001. Martin went pale. Vivian noticed his face before she understood the card. What is that? She asked. My father answered without raising his voice. Something you should have asked about before deciding where I belonged. Martin asked to see it. My father handed it over. Martin checked the seal, the cardstock, the number, then looked back at my father with a caution he had not shown all day. When he returned it, he used both hands. Vivian recovered first. Old cards can be symbolic, she said. Honorary things. Memorabilia. That does not change how a private wedding operates. I looked at Martin. Does it change operations? He opened his mouth, then closed it. He was no longer dealing with a bride or a donor family. He said, I need administrative verification. Verify it, I said. Here. Now. Vivian cut in. We are not halting a wedding over some antique card. My father slipped the wallet back into his pocket. Then do not hold it, he said. Just tell them what it means. Martin looked at the event coordinator. Call the general manager. Contact the administrative office. Bring down the founder member archive and the honorary registry now. She hesitated. He repeated it, sharper. Now. That was the moment the room changed. Not when the card appeared. Not when Vivian's version started cracking. When the club called for its own records. Because once a system asks for paperwork, the people who use that system as a weapon stop controlling the outcome. Grant finally spoke again. Mom, what is happening? Vivian kept her eyes on Martin. An overreaction, she said. That is what is happening. But her voice had changed. For the first time all day, she sounded less like a woman managing a room and more like a woman trying to outrun a sentence she could not yet hear but knew was coming. 2 security staff appeared near the ballroom doors and waited. Martin started issuing instructions with the clipped tone of a man hiding inside procedure. He requested the archive ledger. He asked the front desk for the membership vault code. He told security to pause all entrance activity until review was complete. Then he said no one should leave the ballroom level until the matter was resolved. That landed harder than anything else. Because the hierarchy had become visible. People who thought they were the center of the event were now standing inside someone else's process. Vivian stepped closer to Martin and lowered her voice. My family underwrites half the charitable calendar here. Martin did not lower his. Today is not about underwriting, Mrs. Hale. Today is about verification. That was the first honest sentence the club had spoken all afternoon. I stood beside my parents and watched the room wait. But none of that mattered once the truth had to be read instead of repeated. Everyone in that room felt it. And somewhere above us, in an office full of ledgers and archived names, the mechanism they had tried to hide behind was already turning against them. 10 minutes later, the general manager came down with an archive book, a slim file box, and a woman from records carrying a tablet. The room no longer felt like a wedding. It felt like a hearing. The general manager, Russell Dean, placed the archive book on the registration table and asked my father for the card. My father handed it over. Russell studied the front, turned it once, then looked at Martin. Why was this member escorted to a service corridor, he asked. Vivian answered first. There was confusion. No one knew who he was, and the card appears to be from another era. Russell ignored her. He opened the archive book, turned several pages, then stopped. The records clerk checked the digital registry and confirmed the entry. Russell read the name out loud. Daniel Brooks. Then he read the next line. Founder-level honorary member. Issued Charter Access Designation 001 by Executive Order of Chairman Walter Keating. The room went still. Russell opened the file box and removed a preserved letter. He read it slowly. This designation is granted in recognition of extraordinary life-saving action during the Hawthorne Crest electrical incident of June 1989. The holder is to be extended lifetime access, full courtesy privileges, and formal protection of status equal to founding member rank within club grounds. That was the story. More than 30 years earlier, during an electrical failure at the club, my father had stepped in before emergency crews arrived and kept the club chairman alive long enough for help to reach him. Walter Keating had rewarded him with position. And my father had never once used it. Vivian. Recovered fast, but not cleanly. That is certainly touching, she said. But an old honorary gesture is not the same thing as current hosting authority for a private wedding. Russell closed the file. Mrs. Hale, honorary founder status at this club is not symbolic. It is active. It carries standing protections under our conduct code. She tried again. Then this is still a misunderstanding. Had Mr. Brooks identified himself properly, staff could have adjusted. My father looked at her. I did identify myself, he said. Your staff saw my daughter. Your family saw my wife. You made your decision before you wanted my name. That line landed harder than anything else because it was true. Vivian turned to Russell. Surely intent matters. No one meant disrespect. I stepped forward. Intent is what people say when the result exposes them, I said. The result was my parents being placed beside trash because they did not look expensive enough for your guests. Grant finally spoke. Elena, please. We can still fix this. I looked at him and understood everything I had missed. Men like Grant always think there is still time to fix things after the truth comes out. What they mean is there is still time to protect themselves from consequences. No, I said. You could have fixed it when it was happening. Russell opened the conduct binder Martin had tried to close earlier and read aloud. Any guest, donor, trustee, or event party member found to have engaged in demeaning, exclusionary, or derogatory conduct toward a founder rank member or their immediate family may be removed from club property at management discretion. Vivian went still. Then she made the mistake that ended her. If he is such an important member, she said, why did he come dressed like that? No one spoke after that. She had taken everything deniable and made it plain. My mother did not say a word. She just lifted her chin. My father placed the card on the table between them. I did not need this card to know who I was, he said. You needed it to decide how to treat me. Then he turned to Russell. I am requesting removal of any guest whose conduct violated club standards toward my wife, my daughter, and me. Russell nodded once. Security. 2 guards moved immediately. Not loud. Just final. That was the moment power changed hands. For real. Not because my father raised his voice. Not because anyone argued louder. Because the club had to choose between protecting a donor family and obeying its own written record. Once the words were read, tones stopped mattering. Money stopped mattering. Only standing and conduct remained. And everyone in that ballroom understood exactly why they were leaving. Grant slowed near me as his family was escorted toward the entrance. He said my name like a question. I gave him the only answer he deserved. You did not lose me today. You gave me up when you let her decide what respect costs. Then I looked at Vivian. That was not confusion. That was character. For the first time all day, she had nothing to say. The wedding did not happen. There was no aisle. No vows. No first dance saved by a softer song and a fake smile. Hawthorne Crest staff cleared the ballroom in less than 20 minutes. Vendors packed quietly. Guests left in careful silence. I stood in the middle of the room in my wedding dress while tables were stripped down around me, and for the first time that day I did not feel embarrassed. I felt precise. That surprised me. I thought a broken wedding would feel like chaos. Instead it felt like math. A line had been crossed. Evidence had been read. The result was final. Grant texted me before he even reached the parking lot. He said his mother had been under pressure. He said the club had overreacted. He said none of this should erase what we had built together. What we had built together. That sentence almost made me laugh. Because what we had built collapsed the second his mother put my parents beside a service entrance, and he decided preserving the event mattered more than protecting the people who raised me. You do not discover character when life is easy. You discover it when respect becomes inconvenient. I did not answer him. I took off my heels, carried them in one hand, and walked outside with my parents to the rear patio behind the library wing. The sun was lower by then. The air had cooled. My mother sat down first and smoothed her dress again, but this time not because she was ashamed. It was just a habit. My father stood by the stone railing, looking over the golf course below. Then my mother said the one thing that nearly broke me. She said, I am sorry this happened on your wedding day. Not I am sorry for what they did to us. Not I am sorry you had to see that. She was still apologizing for taking up space in a room that had treated her badly. I knelt in front of her and said, no. This did not happen because of you. It happened for me. I needed to see it before it became my life. My father looked at me then, and that small look meant more than any speech in the ballroom ever could. Approval. Relief. Maybe even pride. Russell, the general manager, came out a few minutes later with a written apology and an offer to reschedule the event under the club's hospitality. My father thanked him and declined. That mattered too. The point was never to win the room back. The point was to stop begging for dignity from people who had already priced it. Before we left, my father took the cream-colored card from his wallet one last time. He looked at it, turned it over once, then slid it back into place again. He had never used it to get better treatment. He had only kept it because some promises deserve to be remembered, even when you do not need to cash them in. That was the lesson I took home. Real class does not announce itself. Real love does not ask you to tolerate disrespect for the sake of appearances. And any family that needs proof of status before they can offer basic decency is not a family you build a future with. I lost a wedding that day. I kept my last clean chance to leave the wrong life. If someone tells you to stay quiet so the room can stay comfortable, look closely at who is being asked to pay for that comfort. Before you let anyone rewrite your worth, tell me in the comments where you would have drawn the line. Choose your people. Read what is written. And if respect only appears after the card comes out, do not stay long enough to celebrate there.